This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
So when I was in high school, I managed to piss off this girl who was very popular and very petty. The reason why she was pissed off at me was because there was a boy that she liked, and this boy was interested in me. So she started a rumor that I had slept around and that I was pregnant. And I remember for a couple of weeks, there was a bit of a stir. People would always come to me and they would ask me if this rumor was true. And when I would get that question, I would say something that my grandmother and other older Southern people around me said often, which was, consider the source. And eventually, this rumor died down, namely because at the time I was actually on a weight loss journey. And when people saw after a couple of weeks that I was losing weight, not getting bigger from this supposed baby, they realized that she was making this all up. I want to talk to you about that phrase, consider the source. Welcome to Confidently Cherished. My name is Keshia Rice. I am a dating coach and hypnotherapist. I help women break from their own unhealthy relationship patterns, generational, ancestral patterns, and learn how to create healthy, satisfying, cherished relationships. So, this idea of considering the source, in case you didn't know, in another life, before I became a dating coach, I was a full-time journalist. And as a journalist, sources are really important, right? You know, there's kind of a running joke in the news industry that if your mother says she loves you, check other sources for confirmation, right? And sourcing is so important as a journalist because you want to get the story right. You want to make sure that everything is correct. You want to make sure that for legal reasons, for ethics reasons, you've done everything that you can do to be right. And yes, sometimes journalists still get it wrong. But journalists work very, very hard to get the story straight, because of course it's your job. If you're passionate about working in that industry, you want your audience to have the truth. There's legal issues with that. There's ethics issues, and you want to have that trust in your audience. So having that background of having worked in news, and I had decided that I wanted to be a journalist when I was like 4 years old. So I was always fascinated with sourcing and where things came from and accurate information, right? It really disheartens me to see so much misinformation on social media nowadays. But you know what disheartens me even more is the lack of critical thinking behind a lot of what is put out on the internet. It's not just that people get on Beyonce's internet and lie, right? Because you expect that to happen. It is the fact that a lot of times people don't think about where these lies are coming from and what motives people have to say certain things. And if you are not thinking critically, it could be wrecking your love life. It could be wrecking your chances of finding a healthy relationship. And I am in particular talking about, the alpha male, alpha bro podcast, a lot of these male content creators that keep popping up giving dating and relationship advice. And don't worry, I'm not just slamming the men. Even some of these female coaches who are so big on femininity or so big on hypergamy. Here's the thing. I do think that men are capable of giving decent relationship advice. So I'm not saying that all male dating coaches are trash, although a lot of them are. And when it comes to female femininity and hypergamy coaches, I believe that teaching femininity is important. I also believe that women need to understand how to use their masculine energy as well. There is a balance. Whether you are male or female, you have both masculine and feminine energy, and there's a balance in how you use those. In fact, I did 2 episodes much earlier in this podcast on what is masculine energy, what is feminine energy. If you have not listened to those, I highly recommend you go do that. But again, it is the lack of balance that I have with those femininity coaches. And with the hypergamy coaches, look, women should, have the lives that they dream of having. Whatever you desire, I have no doubt that you can create that. At the same time, not every woman really cares that much at the end of the day about being married to a millionaire or a billionaire. Not every woman even cares about being married. And even if you want to be married, even if you expect to be provided for, there's also a lot of value in, as a woman, having your own. I always tell clients of mine, especially the ones who, before they came to me, were watching content from certain hypergamous coaches, that, again, there's nothing wrong with wanting someone to provide. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be taken care of. But at the end of the day, you should always have FU money, right? You should always be in a position where if you need to leave this relationship because of abuse or whatever reason, you could. Even if you just want to leave this relationship, you could. And that's something that a lot of these hypergamous coaches don't talk about. The fact that there are women who spend so much time chasing a man with money, and then they get with this man, and because they didn't vet this man's character, they only vetted his wallet, they end up in some pretty disastrous and sometimes even dangerous situations. And when you think about these things that are happening online, I want you to consider the source, right? So when it comes to the passport bros, the so-called alpha males that are doing podcasts, first of all, these men are not getting as many women as you might think they are. A lot of them are not making as much money as you think they are, having known some behind the scenes of some of these media platforms or some of these websites and social media sites that they have. They're not as quote unquote high value as they often portray themselves to be. But beyond that, there have been so many research studies in the wake of the pandemic about how men are lonelier than ever before, about how men are having a harder time in the dating world, about how the dating apps are highly skewed in favor of women and not in favor of men. There's some of these apps where the ratio of men to women is like, for every 8 men, there's only 1 woman, which means that, again, if you're a woman, you have plenty of options. Yes, you also get plenty of creeps because some of these men are getting increasingly desperate. but you have so many more options than the men do. And a lot of these men are recognizing that. They're also recognizing that in a world where women are talking about things like finding a man who's a provider, being hypergamous, in the United States, the average man only earns somewhere around $55,000 a year. And nowadays, there are a lot of women who earn way more than that. Off the top of my head, pretty much all of my female friends earn more than that. I can only think of maybe one or two who would earn like at that or less. So a lot of women are saying that they don't need a man, right, to provide for them because they can provide for themselves. And if they do, they want to be with someone who makes more money than them. So if these women are already making above average, then they are looking for men who make well above average, which means that most of the male dating pool is not appealing to them. And I want to take a side note here just to say your relationship choices, if you decide that you want to be like Oprah and, have a partner for life but not get married, that is you. You decide that you are child free, that is you. There are an increasing number of women who have decided that the rich auntie lifestyle and never getting married, never having kids is for them. I coach women who want to get married, who want to be in that forever relationship. But at the same time, I don't judge women who have a different opinion or who have a different dream, right? At the end of the day, I want to see all women happy and thriving. So you do what is going to make you happy in regards to relationships. But back to my main point. These men are highly motivated to tell women that women are hitting the wall, that women are less attractive if they have kids. They're less attractive if they're above a certain weight. They're less attractive if they're above a certain age, because these men are seeing that each day their options for dating get fewer and fewer, right? So if all the women out here in the world, all these beautiful, gorgeous women, love themselves, set higher standards, set higher boundaries, there are a lot of men who are frankly screwed. So of course, they are highly incentivized to say things to beat down a woman's self-esteem, keep her down, so that, she does not want to step outside of what they can offer, which is in some cases very little, right? They want to make sure that these women have self-esteem that is low enough for them to settle and accept less in a relationship. And again, there are great men out there, lots of them actually, but there are also a lot of men out there who don't want to do what it takes to be great. And when they talk about how things were so much easier back in their grandparents' days, things were so much easier because back then women couldn't have bank accounts. Women couldn't get well-paying jobs. Women were dependent on their husbands for everything, which means that women had to get married and they had to put up with the BS, right? They had to stay with a husband who was cheating on them and had a whole nother family down the road, because without that man, again, they couldn't get a bank account. Without that man, they couldn't get a house. They would have been hosed if they didn't stay in their marriages. So they did what they had to do when they stayed. You talk about these femininity coaches, you talk about hypergamy coaches. Femininity is important, right? Learning to balance those energies again, because it's not just femininity, it's also balancing your masculine energy. That is an important skill to learn. I have a whole course on that. So obviously I believe in how important it is. At the same time, when you have these women who are overemphasizing femininity and doing all of these things to be seen as an attractive feminine woman, they are creating situations that are pretty much impossible for the average woman to attain. And what I mean by that is, again, we are supposed to be balanced in our masculine and feminine energy, so no woman is feminine all the time. And actually, if she were feminine and all the time, she would put herself in a very dangerous situation, because masculine energy is a container for the feminine. So when it comes to our masculine energy, it is the side of us that is protective of us, that holds space for the feminine energy to nourish and flow and be creative and be present and all those things. So a woman who is feminine 100% of the time really would not survive out in the real world. And I think a lot of so-called femininity coaches know that. So by teaching that, they set a standard that can't realistically be attained, which means that you will always have an audience, because women will keep coming to you and keep buying courses because they're still not feminine enough. When the gag is, they never will be by those standards, right? And it's the same with hypergamy coaches, because here's the thing with that. Hypergamy really just means leveling up in dating. It means finding someone who is at a better financial standpoint than you are, with the idea of being with them means that you can build a better life than you would have built on your own. And from that perspective, if you as a woman are making, say, $35,000 a year, right? And you meet a man who is making that average. So he's making $50,000 a year. Well, he's making more than you. And because he's making more than you, he can afford more than you. And being with him would be an upgrade to your lifestyle. If the two of you married, you'd be able to afford to live in a nicer place. You'd be able to afford to go out more, maybe vacation more with that combined income. So you would be successfully hypergamous. You would have leveled up. Instead, though, a lot of these level up coaches are selling lifestyles of being married to the top 1%, maybe even the top 10%, which just the math there tells you that most women are not going to marry men who are in that top percentage. So instead of focusing on realistically making sure that you yourself are stable, and then finding someone who can help improve your life, it is millionaire or bust, which, again, is a standard that a lot of women are not going to obtain. And because so many women have been fed this for so long, they think if, oh my God, God forbid, I live in the South in a small town in a city with a incredibly low cost of living, and I marry a man who makes six figures, I have failed, when, that man makes more than like most people in his state, right? So it is important that we really consider the source when we think about these messages that we get on social media, these messages that we get in general online, these messages that we get from the people in our lives. Because I have spent this episode talking about the internet, but this works in real life too, when it comes to family members and friends and all of that. Those family members who keep telling you that you need to hurry up and get married, a lot of them are either A, chronically single, and not just chronically single, but bitter about their singleness, so they have no lives, and they want to meddle in yours. You should stay away from them. Or these are often the unhappily married people who want you to be as miserable as them. I love marriage. I think that marriage is great for me. it is amazing for me. And if you are a woman who is single and you are looking for guidance in finding the right partner and getting married, then I want to help you with that too. At the same time, I recognize that marriage is not for everyone. And because it is not for everyone, first of all, as a woman who is satisfied in my marriage, I try to mind my own business, but I also don't push it on everyone either. So, even when you get advice from family members and from friends, consider the source. What motives do they have to give you that piece of advice? And especially when you are online, when you are following your favorite content creators, including me, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube at Keshia Rice. But yes, even when I say something, consider the source. Consider why I might say that. And if you agree with me, if you resonate with me, then that is fantastic. But make sure that you are always intentional about the content that you are consuming. So that is all for now. I hope that this podcast sounds okay. This episode may sound a little different because I am currently on vacation with my hubby. So I am actually going to go back to spending time with him. And I will talk to you very soon. Love you. Bye. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KeshiaRice.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.